In the ice-locked heart of Siberia, where howling winds can freeze your breath in seconds and the nearest neighbor might be a day's journey away, one elderly woman made a choice that would reshape her destiny. Far from any hospital or grocery store, she found herself face to face with an impossible situation. Three orphaned bear cubs crying out in desperation. Who would expect help to arrive in one of Earth's coldest, loneliest corners? Yet despite her own frailty, 76-year-old Anna Petrova refused to look away. Most people would have turned back, locked the door, and pretended they heard nothing. After all, wild bears can be dangerous, especially when they grow up. But Anna's compassion overruled her fears. With a single act of kindness, she embarked on a path that would forever alter her relationship, not only with these cubs, but also with the wilderness that surrounded her. What happened next was beyond astonishing, a story that defies logic and challenges our understanding of how far gratitude can cross the boundary between human and beast. The question is, would you have done the same if you heard those cries? Prepare yourself for a tale unbelievable. You'll question every notion of what's truly possible. In the remote outskirts of eastern Siberia, the landscape can appear both breathtaking and terrifying. Towering pines blanket miles of frosty terrain, their branches weighed down by thick layers of snow. Rivers freeze into solid glass, reflecting the pastel hues of the endless winter sky. Here, roads are more suggestion than certainty, and a simple trip to the nearest trading post can consume the entire day. The nearest village might be a few hours away by snowmobile, assuming the trail is clear of fallen trees and drifting snowbanks. Despite these formidable conditions, Anna Petrova chose this wilderness as her home. 15 years earlier, she had lost her husband, Victor, to a sudden illness. Grief-stricken and weary of city life, she retreated to the cabin they'd built together decades ago, a modest wooden structure perched at the edge of a dense forest. While many saw her choice as solitary confinement, Anna found peace there. By day, she gathered firewood and hunted small game. By night, she read aging paperback novels by the flickering glow of an oil lamp. Although the wind often roared outside, rattling her windows, she learned to find comfort in nature's music. She knew every track in the snow, every rustle among the pines, and even recognized the distant howls of migrating wolves. On the rare occasions when supplies needed restocking, Anna would brave the rickety truck path or hitch a ride with a passing trapper. Yet she relished her independence. Out here, life was brutally honest. If she didn't gather enough wood, she risked freezing. If she left food unsecured, scavengers would steal it. That simplicity, stark as the bare trees in winter, gave her daily life a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. Loneliness was a companion she'd grown to accept, but never once did she expect fate to thrust her into an unimaginable adventure. Her humble dwelling stood on a narrow ridge, offering a sweeping view of endless evergreens. In the distance, thin columns of smoke occasionally signaled a neighbor's cabin or perhaps a passing reindeer herder. Winters were especially harsh, but Anna had learned to embrace the isolation as a form of quiet healing. Sometimes a letter still arrived. Despite her meager resources, she still found ways to share what little she had: an extra loaf of bread for the passing hunter, a warm place by the stove for a stray dog. In these gestures of kindness, she kept her husband's spirit alive. Little did she know that, soon enough, those same instincts of compassion would spark a remarkable chain of events, one that would challenge her every notion of solitude and reintroduce her to the power of community in the most unexpected form. That frigid morning in late January 2019 began like most others. Anna woke before dawn, fed the small stove that kept her cabin habitable, and brewed a kettle of tea. The temperature had plummeted overnight to nearly minus 40 degrees Celsius, turning every exhaled breath into a puff of crystallized mist. She looked out her window, where the first pale light revealed a landscape smothered in white silence. Suddenly, she heard something strange, a faint whimper rising above the wind's constant moan. At first, she thought it might be an injured fox or a stray dog seeking warmth. But as the cries grew more urgent, she realized they were coming from her storage shed, a rickety building where she kept extra supplies. Heart pounding, Anna bundled herself in layers of clothing and braced against the lethal chill. In all her years here, she had never encountered a sound quite like this, a small, pitiful plea for help that seemed impossible to ignore. Opening the shed door required prying a frozen latch with numb fingers. Inside, the gloom smelled of old wood and kerosene. Anna waited for her eyes to adjust. That's when she spotted movement in a corner, a trembling mass of dark fur, quivering and huddled. Stepping closer, she discovered three tiny bear cubs, each no larger than a newborn puppy, their wide eyes reflecting fear and desperation. The cubs were hungry, disoriented, and had apparently been without their mother for some time. Later, local hunters would confirm the grisly truth. Poachers had killed the mother bear for her gallbladder, a high-priced commodity in illicit markets, leaving the cubs to perish in the unforgiving cold. Stunned, Anna's first instinct was to call for help, but the nearest phone line was kilometers away. She felt a pang of responsibility. If she walked away, these cubs would die. If she took them in, was she risking her life? The harsh laws of nature and the warnings of experts flashed in her mind. While every cautionary tale insisted that wild bears should never imprint on humans, Anna's heart wouldn't let her leave these helpless creatures behind. She fetched an old blanket and draped it around their shaking bodies, mindful not to startle them. One cub tried to nip at her mitten, but even its attempt was feeble. They were so small, so vulnerable, and the maternal instinct in her soul awakened in a way she hadn't felt since losing Victor. Quickly, she prepared a makeshift bed near her stove and carried the cubs inside one by one, each weighing barely a few kilograms. With warmed goat's milk mixed with a bit of honey, she offered them the first nourishment they'd had in days. Her mind raced. What next? Should she alert the local ranger? Would the authorities take the cubs away or, worse, euthanize them? Torn between fear and compassion, Anna decided to act quietly. In that moment, all she knew was that three fragile lives depended on her, and for better or worse, she had already stepped across a line she could never uncross. She promised herself she would care for them just until they stood a fighting chance, unaware that this singular choice would echo across the next 5 years of her life, and that echo would roar in ways unimaginable. For the next several weeks, Anna balanced caution with care. She understood the risks. Bears are not pets, and once they matured, their size and strength could pose grave dangers. Yet she found a way to feed them consistently without turning them into domesticated animals. She placed their meals, mostly softened porridge, occasional fish scraps, and milk outside her back door, keeping her interactions minimal. Boris, Natasha, and Misha, as she named them, quickly learned to recognize her gentle voice. Although their trust grew, Anna always stayed mindful of their wild natures. Each cub displayed a distinct personality. Boris was bolder, often the first to approach. Natasha seemed cautious, carefully observing before moving closer. Misha was playful, batting at falling snowflakes or chasing his siblings around the yard. The small cabin bustled with new life, but Anna never once forgot they belonged to the forest beyond her walls. She prayed she could guide them to that freedom without harming their natural instincts. Each night, she noted their progress in a journal, how much they ate, how they played, and any signs of aggression. She also recorded the shifting temperatures, knowing her time with them might be cut short if a sudden cold snap worsened. Still, despite the challenges, Anna felt rejuvenated. These cubs gave her purpose, a sense of belonging that she'd longed for since Victor's passing. By mid-March, the cubs had grown noticeably bigger, their fur glossy under the pale sunlight. Anna knew that soon she would have to let them go. Wildlife experts often insisted that human intervention could leave wild animals too dependent or unfit for survival, but Anna tried her best to strike a delicate balance. She never caged them, never forced affection, always encouraging them to explore the perimeter of her land. Some days they would disappear into the trees for hours, but come dusk, she would find them lingering near the cabin, as though they weren't quite ready to sever this bond. Locals who heard rumors of Anna's bears labeled her both foolish and brave. One gruff hunter, upon visiting, shook his head in disbelief and muttered, "You're courting disaster, old woman." Yet as Anna watched Boris wrestle playfully with Misha, while Natasha stood guard, she couldn't help believing they were destined for something greater. Maybe, she thought, Their story would end with them running free through the endless pine forests. Or maybe it would end with heartbreak. Either way, she made peace with the uncertainty, trusting her instincts and the inexplicable connection forming between her and these creatures born of the wild. And so each sunrise brought both relief and dread, for she knew the moment of their departure grew closer with every passing thaw. In late December, a cruel cold front swept across the region, plunging temperatures to a record-breaking -50 degrees Celsius. Anna had been expecting a shipment of firewood from a local supplier, but the roads were sealed by ice, and the delivery never arrived. Day by day, her stockpile dwindled. She rationed her wood as carefully as possible, but soon she realized she would have to gather more herself or freeze to death. Wrapping herself in her heaviest fur coat and multiple scarves, she harnessed her old sled and ventured into the forest. The world outside her cabin felt eerily silent, as though the bitter cold had stilled even the birds. Each step crunched through a crust of snow that reached her knees, making progress agonizingly slow. Anna recalled her husband's advice, always mark your path, but the falling snow quickly erased any trace of her footprints. Undeterred, she pressed on, determined to find dead branches or fallen trees she could drag back. However, the wind soon picked up, and what began as a light snowfall turned into a swirling blizzard. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and her breath froze against her scarf. With night approaching, she realized she was hopelessly lost. Panic rose inside her as she imagined the unimaginable, perishing alone in the white void. She clung to the sled, her face numb, her hands shaking, wondering if she would ever find her way home again. She whispered a prayer, though the storm's roar swallowed every syllable of her plea. Then, cutting through the howling gale, she heard an uncanny rumble that seemed almost familiar. Squinting through the whiteout, she glimpsed a massive shape, dark and towering, moving toward her. It was Boris, now a fully grown bear with a powerful build. Her breath caught in her throat at the sight of him, but relief overwhelmed her fear. Within moments, Natasha and Misha also emerged from the raging snow, flanking Anna in a protective formation. The three bears circled her, nudging her gently, guiding her in a direction she couldn't discern. Where she stumbled, they paused. When she veered off course, they uttered deep, resonant grunts as if to correct her path. Time blurred. Anna couldn't guess how long they trudged through the drifts. Eventually, the faint outline of her cabin materialized through the haze. With their help, she stumbled inside, collapsing onto the floor in tears. But the bears did not leave just yet. Outside, they made repeated trips, dragging dead wood to her door, enough to fuel her fire for days. Only when her supply was secure did the trio vanish back into the storm. As Anna curled up near the stove, warmth returning to her fingertips, she realized something profound. These wild creatures, once helpless cubs at her mercy, had just saved her life. In that moment, she understood a bond had been forged that no storm could ever break. And in that freezing twilight, she felt an unwavering truth. Compassion given freely may someday save us, or even save others. Word of Anna's bear encounters spread quietly through nearby villages, inspiring a strange mix of admiration and scorn. Some saw it as a miraculous display of human-animal bonding, while others whispered that Anna was tampering with forces she couldn't control. Yet nothing could have prepared her for the threat that arrived one warm spring morning. Illegal loggers, armed with chainsaws and heavy machinery, set up camp at the edge of her property. The first signs were the grinding echoes of diesel engines and the sharp roar of saw blades biting into ancient pines. Anna peered through her window, heart racing, as she watched men spray paint bright orange marks on towering evergreens. They were well organized, likely part of a larger criminal network intent on stripping the forest of its valuable timber. She knew full well that remote cabins often went missing when they stood in the way of such profitable operations. Her hands trembled as two men approached her front porch, pounding on the door and demanding she come out to negotiate the new logging boundaries. Anna's mind spun with possibilities. She had no phone, no easy way to call for help. Most local authorities turned a blind eye when paid off by these syndicates, and the nearest police station was hours away by treacherous roads. Summoning her courage, she opened the door a crack. The men scowled, their postures stiff with arrogance. One spat tobacco juice onto her steps and demanded she vacate the premises. Anna tried to protest, her voice quavering. She had lived here for decades. They had no right. But their mocking laughter told her everything she needed to know. They were fully prepared to remove any obstacle by intimidation or force. Just as she braced for the worst, an earth-shaking roar thundered through the clearing. Boris, Natasha, and Misha emerged from three different directions, massive silhouettes backlit by the morning sun. The loggers froze in disbelief, staring at the approaching bears. Rather than launch a mindless attack, the bears executed what could only be described as a coordinated display of power. Boris rose on his hind legs, towering well over 7 feet, before slamming his paws onto an empty metal barrel beside Anna's cabin, crushing it like tinfoil. Natasha and Misha stalked toward the trucks, tearing through tires with their formidable claws, rendering the vehicles useless. Fuel containers toppled, chainsaws clattered to the ground. The loggers shouted curses, scrambling to rescue what equipment they could, but within moments it was clear they were outmatched. Though the bears roared and swiped at property, they never touched human flesh, an intentional restraint that struck fear deeper than any physical wound could. Panicked, the men retreated to their damaged trucks, tires shredded, engines hissing steam. Boris let out another powerful roar, as if delivering a final warning. With no remaining gear to continue their operation, the loggers had no choice but to flee, leaving behind ruined machinery and half-marked trees. Anna stood on her porch in stunned silence, hardly believing what she just witnessed. Wild animals might defend territory, but this felt personal, like a deliberate intervention on her behalf. In the days that followed, the bears continued to patrol, leaving fresh tracks around her land. Claw marks etched on surrounding trees formed a boundary that even the most reckless poacher would hesitate to cross. Word spread quickly among the locals, and soon journalists arrived, curious to see if the stories were true. But the bears stayed hidden, appearing only when necessary, as though they alone decided who threatened Anna's world. Though shaken by the loggers' aggression, Anna found a renewed sense of security in the presence of her unlikely guardians. They had once relied on her kindness to survive. Now they were repaying that kindness tenfold, becoming the fierce protectors she never asked for, but so clearly needed. As each dawn broke, she half expected the loggers to return, armed with rifles or reinforcements. Yet no one came. The rumor of 3 enormous black bears defending an old woman's homestead spread faster than any official notice could. It was as though the forest itself had risen in rebellion against the trespassers, guided by creatures that possessed both brute strength and uncanny wisdom. Anna often wondered if it was pure instinct or genuine gratitude. Either way, she was thankful beyond words, realizing that in this untamed wilderness, loyalty could transcend the boundaries of species. And still, the greatest test of that loyalty lay ahead, a fiery ordeal that would cement their bond in ashes and flame. That summer brought one of the worst heat waves in Siberian history. Dry winds swept across the region, transforming the thick underbrush into a tinderbox. Wildfires sparked in multiple locations, merging into a colossal blaze that devoured acres of forest every hour. The skies took on a menacing red hue, and the air grew acrid with smoke. Anna first noticed a light snowfall of ash drifting against her windows, an eerie reminder that catastrophe loomed. She had no television, no radio, and no phone to warn her of evacuation orders. Helicopters thundered far overhead, but they focused on more populated regions, leaving isolated homesteads like hers to fend for themselves. One evening, the horizon glowed a haunting orange, and Anna felt the temperature spike even indoors. She hurried outside to find the distant treetops wreathed in flames. Embers whirled on the wind, landing dangerously close to her cabin's old wooden walls. She scrambled for buckets, soaking the ground around her porch in a desperate attempt to create a makeshift firebreak. Each breath stung her lungs, and the roar of the inferno grew louder. Heart pounding, she realized she had to flee. Yet she had no idea which direction was safe. Smoke choked the narrow path leading to the village, and the forest to the west was already ablaze. Trapped between walls of flame, Anna wondered if this was where her story would end. Out of the swirling haze, three familiar silhouettes appeared once more. Boris, Natasha, and Misha materialized with an urgency she had never seen before. They circled her in tight formation, vocalizing with distressed grunts and huffs, as if signaling her to follow. Then, to her astonishment, Boris padded off into the smoky darkness. Anna hesitated. What if the bear was leading her deeper into danger? But Natasha pressed gently against her leg, guiding her forward. Step by step, the bears navigated a circuitous route that wound through shallow streams and rocky clearings. Sometimes they doubled back, sniffing the air, seemingly sensing wind shifts that Anna couldn't perceive. Whenever flames crackled too close, the bears adjusted course. It felt less like a random escape and more like a carefully orchestrated plan. Hours later, just before sunrise, they reached a wide gravel road where a temporary evacuation center had been set up. Exhausted rescue workers rushed to help Anna, astonished to find an elderly woman stumbling out of the wildfire with three giant bears in her wake. Officials gaped, scarcely believing their eyes. By the time they tried to document the extraordinary scene, Boris, Natasha, and Misha had disappeared again, swallowed by the smoke. Later, when Anna finally returned to inspect the rubble of her home, she discovered an area around her old cabin where the bears had apparently cleared debris days earlier, attempting to prevent the worst of the fire from reaching her. It was a final, awe-inspiring act of foresight and protection. No one could say if it was instinct or something deeper, but everyone agreed. These bears had performed deeds almost beyond comprehension, turning a tragic wildfire into a testament of courage and gratitude. Anna's story spread far beyond her secluded corner of Siberia, capturing hearts worldwide. Volunteers helped rebuild her cabin, and environmental organizations used her tale as a rallying cry for stronger wildlife protection. News outlets dubbed her the Bear Guardian, while others called the bears angels of the forest. For Anna, it all felt surreal. She kept living much as she had before, tending to her daily chores in a repaired but humbler cabin, always leaving a small offering of food at the forest's edge. Occasionally, she glimpsed Boris, Natasha, or Misha wandering nearby, as though checking on her well-being. They had grown larger, more confident, unmistakably wild, yet their bond remained unbreakable, a silent testament to compassion repaid in ways no one could have foreseen. In the end, Anna recognized that her quiet act of mercy toward three orphan cubs had ignited a chain of miracles. Poachers were deterred, loggers were driven off, and a wildfire lost some of its deadly impact because of three bears who refused to forget the human who once saved them. The lesson was as simple as it was profound. Sometimes caring for another life, be it human or animal, can echo back to us with unimaginable power. So now, dear viewer, consider this your invitation. Will you let this story spark a new kindness in your own heart? If Anna's journey moved you, subscribe to this channel for more real-life tales of hope and resilience. Like this video, share it with a friend who needs inspiration, and comment below on what aspect of this story amazed you most. Because in a world often overshadowed by hardship, we all need reminding that an open hand can spark a rescue, and sometimes even a revolution of compassion.